Alright, so it looks like I'm live, and this one's definitely going to be quite awkward because I'm holding my iPad while literally cooking breakfast. So it's one thing that I've never actually done, which I guess this is slightly of a vlog type situation. But I'm doing it because people often ask about food and what I eat for some reason. People are very interested in other people's dietary consumptions. So I just share with you my rough system and how I'm cooking myself breakfast and what I'm doing. So I basically have some Swiss chard that I've chopped up, just fresh. I've got some sausages that I'm cooking. I have some eggs that I will be scrambling up. And then one key thing that I highly recommend is basically, here I have sweet potatoes, carrots, that I had already pre-cooked and boiled and sauteed briefly. So basically what I'll do is do like some short cooked vegetables, say like peppers or zucchini or some greens. And then when those are almost done, basically just add in the pre-cooked root vegetables and things to give it a bit more sustenance. So this cuts down on your prep time and makes your way of actually cooking things a lot quicker and easier because it doesn't take that long to boil all of those vegetables. And then once you have them ready, they're ready to go for the rest of however long it takes you to eat it. So that's basically how it works. And it's kind of weird, but it's also one of those things that people always ask about. What do you eat for breakfast? What are you going to be eating this? When are you going to be eating later? What do you think about food? What do you think about this diet, that diet, this thing? And I'm like, honestly, I keep it almost too boring and too simple probably to really get into, but this is basically how it goes. And if it was lunch, it would probably be a very similar thing, as I would just sub out for a different protein, but it's still just going to be some straight vegetables and protein, or maybe I'll get crazy and make some kind of curry soup or noodle soup or something like that, more broth based, depending on what I feel like happening, but generally keep it very simple, very clean, very cost effective, and just really easy all around because I don't really feel like spending a lot of time cooking. And I also don't really care. I just want something really simple and straightforward. And the other thing that I wanted to answer in this video is a question that I just got recently about cycling tonic herbs. And I think this is actually a pretty decent question and something that has come up regularly, and it's something that quite a lot of people are interested in. So what I think about it is that kind of two things. It depends on what the herb is, because I think people in a lot of ways misuse the term tonic herb and they apply it to things of which are not actually tonic herbs. So like something that's aggressively hormonal, say like maca, or even on another extreme like yohimbe or tongkat ali or tribulus, things of that nature. People are saying, oh, it's a tonic herb, it's an adaptogen. Or like aggressive deer antler velvet extracts. Oh, it's a tonic herb. Well, no, that preparation in that format is definitely not. It's a hormonal stimulant. It's a natural steroid, basically. So if we're talking about those types of things, then cycling is a real thing and a real necessity. And really, even that term of cycling, I think, probably comes out of bodybuilders and people using steroids and various performance enhancing substances. Because the idea is that you're taking this endogenous thing, which is ramping up your hormone production or perhaps giving you exogenous hormones, so then it will eventually downregulate your body's own production or throw off your own body's sense of equilibrium and balance so that your hormones go out of whack. Hence, you only can do it for short periods of time, or you have to do it in very specific ways so that you don't completely throw off your inherent hormone balance. So what happens is people sort of assume this same thing to all herbs and supplements and then apply it across the board when it's not necessarily true. For example, I would say pretty much all the herbs I sell are not aggressively hormonal and are not throwing your system in really any extreme ways. Hence, I don't sell any of those herbs I listed because oftentimes for those reasons. And then sometimes people are taking it and they don't actually really need it because it's it's a real skill to be able to understand the real causality of things. So people might say like, oh, I'm like testosterone deficient, or I need this hormonal boost because I feel this thing. When in reality, maybe they feel that thing because they just stay up late, they don't go to bed early, or they don't eat regular meals and their blood sugar gets out of whack, or they drink a bunch of coffee on an empty stomach in the morning, or just basically some small simple thing which is throwing off their equilibrium, when in reality they don't need more stimulation. They need to just adjust some simple basic behaviors. So that's the first thing to understand about cycling. In my opinion, that's probably where it comes from and why people are kind of worried about it and concerned about it. And if you are taking herbs like that are hormonal, that are aggressive in that way, then basically it is a real concern. And from, I used to take maca a lot back in the day, and basically you do notice that after a while you stop feeling the effects, and it does stop seeming to work and have the effect you want. But when I look back at pretty much all the products that I sell, which I've been taking on a regular basis for over a decade, I still to this day feel the effects and notice the effects almost just as strongly as I did from the very beginning. And I still get benefit from them. And many of those herbs I took on a daily, regular basis in varying high dosages for quite a long time. And I can still take them and they still have an effect. So it's not like a total down regulation happens. And you just hear there's just a lot of mythology and misunderstanding and complete just false information online. Like, for example, the other day someone was asking like, oh, I read on something that in order to get the benefits from lion's mane, you have to take it every day for the rest of your life, and if you stop taking it, you don't get the benefits anymore. And I'm like, that's not really how it works. It's not true at any stretch of the imagination, but this thing has definitely come up. So the other point in terms of cycling and how I tend to look at it is almost like food. So I don't typically eat the same exact thing every day for the entire year. Things will change, things will cycle. Maybe I'll have a similar formula. These are vegetables I'm gonna pre-cook and get ready. These are the ones I'm gonna quick cook. But let's say in the wintertime, I'm gonna change it up and get a whole different set of vegetables. Fall is gonna be different. So it's always kind of changing in a certain way, but there's also there's change, but there's also a certain consistency and formula that is followed. But I'm sort of just following my appetite in what is appropriate for me and what I'm trying to work on. So I apply a similar thought process when it comes to herbs. So for me, I just have, bags of my own products laying around, and whichever ones I'm working on at that time, that's just what I take. And then maybe I'll run out, so then I'll switch to something else. I'll do chaga, and then when I run out of that bag, I'll be like, okay, I'll hit the reishi, and then I'll get the lion's mane, or I'll tend to go mix them together as well. So I can understand at some level if people want a concrete, solid, like this is the right way, this is the wrong way. I don't know if it's necessarily that applicable if we're just talking about things in a general health type of sense. Obviously, there's a very specific thing going on, and a very specific thing we want to work on, then obviously our approach would be a bit different. But I think in terms of cycling, those ideas that I just said are relevant and useful. Understanding the actual functionality of that herb, if it's some kind of aggressive hormonal stimulant or thing that's really working your endocrine system, then yeah, you probably should cycle it, and yeah, it probably will stop working over time, because that tends to be what happens with those things. And the other side of it is if it's not in that category, if it's something that is more gentle and mild and more closer to food, then it can be treated as such. Hence why I'm saying with many of the mushrooms, talking about mixing and matching and doing it then and then doing it that. So on the surface, it can seem like, oh, it's not really a consistency there. But for me at this point, it doesn't. To me, just getting them in my body is beneficial because they're all good and they're all helping me in what I want, which is, supporting my immune system, or, if I'm going to be working out or doing something more energetic, hit the cordyceps, So there's, those small variations that you just have to understand the basic quality of what that herb is and how it makes you feel, which you can really only get through time and experience, which is why sometimes my recommendations could seem a bit like, do this, but also you could do this, but also you could do that. Because ultimately, unless there is something very specific, then it is going to be a bit more general, and there's a certain element of the person finding what actually works for them in their own goals and for what they're trying to work on. Because people respond differently to different herbs at different times. So it becomes obviously much more complicated. And to say, oh, this is going to be A equals B all the time. It's like, well, that's not necessarily always the case because context and relativity. So hope that answers that question and sheds some more insight and perspective on that whole concept of cycling or cycling through herbs. But I think, again, it's important to understand where that concept actually comes from, where it's actually useful and relevant, and also where it might not actually be useful or relevant for people. And I think that is a useful thought exercise to do, because oftentimes there's ideas which are popular, things which maybe people concern themselves with or they spend a lot of time and energy worrying about, but in actuality it might not be relevant or applicable to them in any way, shape, or form. Meaning something like cycling, which is coming out of people probably doing steroids and aggressive hormone stuff, but then someone's taking gynostemma or like chaga or eating goji berries. They're like, do I need to cycle the goji berries? And then it's like, well, from this aggressive hormonal steroid type perspective, no, because it's not what these things are doing. But from a basic common sense food perspective, sure, there needs to be some variation and variety in what you're doing, but also consistency and a certain pattern and regularity. So that is just oftentimes how things work, is it's a merging of coming together of two sort of things and finding some homeostasis or stability within that, and finding something that actually works for what we're trying to do. So that's what I think about it and how I approach it. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't know if that's too all over the place, but just wanted to answer that question, do this video, and also answer the other question which people often ask in live streams. It's like, oh, what do you eat, and what do you cook for breakfast, and how do you cook, and give us meal ideas, and we want to see your food. So I just did literally that, even though it's quite in my mind quite boring and straightforward. But it's just quick cooked vegetables, some pre-cooked denser root vegetables, and then some type of protein on the side. Put it all together, and then when I finish the vegetables in the pot or in the pan, I'll put some butter in there and some salt, just to give it more flavor and consistency and texture and deliciousness. And that is pretty much it. So it's like a basic formula that I can then have a lot of variety in. I can constantly cycle through the proteins. I can constantly cycle through the vegetables. Constantly cycle through different seasonings or different preparations of that, or I can flip it in another way and get into soups and stews, use the Instapot, use those things, but it's still a basic kind of formula. And I think that's at least for me, that's a really helpful way to do things, because I don't really have to think about it. I can just go to the grocery, look at vegetables that seem like they look good and sound good, just grab them, throw them in the cart, come home, cook them quickly, and make food and meals that are pretty cheap, pretty quick and tasty, and also just healthy and clean and simple. So that's what I do. And I think people get food a bit backwards, and they focus on all these little micro details and kind of get lost in the minutia. But personally, I've done that. I've gone down that rabbit hole, and really just comes down to eating actual food and focusing on more so what the point of it is, which is actually helping you feel nourished, balanced, and stable and satisfied. So if those things are being accomplished and you're actually eating real food, then in many ways it's considered a success, in my opinion. So I don't have to like worry about, oh, am I following the blood type diet? Am I balancing this micronutrient with that micronutrient based on the seasonal fluctuation and the transit of Mercury and the transit of Jupiter, plus my X, Y, and Z hormonal axis, plus like you just keep going on and on and on with the nuanced kind of OCD stuff that people get into when it comes to just something as simple as like eat food. But anyways, hopefully this quality actually comes out and it's not so terrible and the camera's not all shaky, because I was like literally just walking around holding my iPad, which is not a good vlog setup situation. So I'll have to invest in some better equipment in the future. Definitely, and a better stand for my iPad, because if I just use the Apple stand, it basically has this angle, which is not that good, versus something where it's more like we're on the same plane. But anyways, thanks for watching this video. Hopefully it's answered your questions and been informative. As always, you can check out HyperionHerbs.com, which is of course my herbal website, hence when I was referencing the stuff that I sell throughout the whole video. Definitely check that out. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.